The Indianapolis Colts defense is here to eat. For the third time this week, they proved to be the better side of the ball in practice, so we'll tell you all about it on this episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Colts fans, thanks so much for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Jake Arthur, joined as always by my partner, Zach Hicks. You know us both from horseshoehuddle.com, part of the Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated family. We are also all over Twitter. You guys know us and love us from there, I'm sure. I'm a credentialed member of the Colts media and a part of the PFWA. And Zach is arguably, he is the most beloved film guy in Colts country, I would say.
Beloved by some.
Yeah, beloved by some, infamous for others. Today, we're going to tell you all about how Wednesday's Colts practice went down, and we'll also talk about how long the starters might play in Saturday's preseason opener in Buffalo and what we think about that. I know, Zach, you're not a big fan, but again, we'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. So starting out Wednesday's practice, the following guys missed practice. It was wide receiver DeMichael Harris, offensive lineman Dennis Kelly, linebacker Forrest Ryan, and defensive tackle Chris Williams. Cornerback Dallas Flowers, he left at one point later in practice. He was looked at by trainers on the sideline. Looked to me like right ankle foot issue is what they were looking at. And finally, the Colts got some guys back on the field because the injury list had just been getting longer without getting many guys back on it. Yeah, you see. So these guys returned. It was Curtis Brooks, of course, wide receiver Paris Campbell, defensive tackle Byron Cowart, running back Devontae Price, safety Will Redmond, and offensive lineman Jason Spriggs. Much of what the 11-on-11 team drills focused on today was the offense being backed up deep into their own territory, and they also did some low red zone work closer to the goal line near the end of practice. So, Zach, we've talked a lot about Alec Pierce versus Stephon Gilmore throughout camp so far. Gilmore's really been kind of getting the better of him, particularly in the one-on-one stuff. But today, the one-on-one drills were right there in the end zone. Pierce made a nice leaping grab against Gilmore. They were kind of tangled a little bit at the catch point, but Pierce was able to pull it down. If you guys haven't seen my notes from today yet, I threw a video of it in there. I think Colts Militia had it, so not a bad one.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot throughout all these training camp podcasts, and again, at the end of the day, this is only going to help Alec Pierce. Every single day seeing, what some people and honestly what we might still be thinking is a top 10 corner in football. He's seeing him every single day in practice. Like, that is huge for Alec Pierce. So the fact that you can already see that improvement coming, you can see him incrementally getting better, that's just a testament to what this matchup is doing for his game. So obviously, again, you want to see that translate more to the 11-on-11s and to the preseason when we get to the preseason. But so far in the one-on-ones and actually seeing it, seeing some progress from Alec Pierce just shows that matchup in practice every day is really helping him.
Yeah, a big thing lately has been, the young receivers having some issues. Pierce is kind of part of that, some drops here or there, not really blowing up in practice so far, but he's fighting for his life against Gilmore every day. So that's kind of to be expected. Like you said, it'll be better for him once the regular season gets here and he's had that on-the-job training against Gilmore. Again, today there was some drops from these tight ends and the wide receivers. Today. So early on, I counted one from Jonathan Taylor as well. He was about to get hit, and then Mo Alley-Cox had one as well. Mo with those big hands, he's not always the most sure-handed fella out there, but those were drive killers. The offense just kind of struggles to put hypothetical points on the board in practice. Still having some of those dropsy issues, so not great. they really need to put this week behind them and kind of look ahead to Buffalo, it sounds like.
Yeah, we said last week, so I don't, or the last podcast yesterday, so I don't want to go too far into it, but this wide receiver group, it is still pretty early. It's still a month until the first game. They still haven't played a preseason game. We still have 2 to 3 weeks left of practices. So I'm still not at that point where it's like, bring in a vet. You have to bring in a vet. These guys aren't ready. But you want to see these drops cleaned up. I mean, again, I went on a whole tangent on it yesterday's podcast. You can live with running the wrong route because, again, it's you're adjusting to a new quarterback. You can live with poor throws or poor timing or just getting beat by Stephon Gilmore. But the drops you cannot live with. You just can't live with drops. They're drive killers. So you want to see that cleaned up, and just having another day filled with drops. I mean, I think Kevin Bowen put it out there on Twitter that he counted half a dozen today as well. Yeah. So you just want to see those numbers come down. It's fine to have 1 or 2 in a practice, but when you're seeing it be 6, 7, 8 every single day, it's like, come on, man. Like, that's the easiest part of your job, is just catching the ball. You did all the work to get open. Just make the catch.
Yeah, and it's drive killers like you mentioned, but in the instance today, it turns the ball over. It was the second team, but Nick Foles hit Philip Lindsay in the end zone, just kind of bounced off Lindsay's chest and hands, and EJ Speed got to the ball before it hit the ground. That's not only a drive killer, you don't have the ball anymore. So that's like the biggest part of it. I think back to like a couple years ago, most of Phillip Rivers' interceptions, I feel like, were tipped balls and like drops and things like that. So we've seen it. A
lot of Andrew Luck's work too in 2018.
Oh yeah.
There was that. There were 2 that come to mind when I think of that 2018 season with Andrew Luck. There was one against the Patriots where Zach Pascal literally like punched it up in the air. And it was tough. And then the one in the disastrous Jaguars game where they lost 6-0, where it literally bounced off Mo's hands on like a deep corner route or something, bounced off his hands right to Myles Jack. And it's like, man, what are you going to do? But yeah, no, drops are killer. I mean, especially in those situations, but drops, they're just such momentum. They're like almost as bad as like a big sack, allowing like a sack. It's just complete momentum killer because you're, if you take the amount of yards that you would have gained on that catch, it's basically like losing yards every time that you have a drop. So you just can't live with those.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I'm tired of talking about the same issue with the offense all week. We can kind of get to some highlight plays from today. One of them was courtesy of Sam Ehlinger again. It was during 7-on-7s, I believe, and it was from 30 yards out. He just kind of hit Isaiah Ford on a rope right down the middle of the field and right inside the end zone. Ford made a great leaping catch, landed right on his back. It looked like he was probably going to have the wind knocked out of him, but landed right on his back and held on to it. So that was a really good play. Paris Campbell was back today. He had a really nice catch, about a 15-yard out route from Ryan. Ashton Dulin had a really nice catch. Nick Foles, again, is probably, I think it was 12 yards I counted. Foles threw a little behind him as he crossed towards the left side, and Dulin just kind of leaped up and reached behind him and pirouetted in the air and came down with it. So Dulin is becoming really good at those not circus catches, but non-routine catches, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. I will say, from watching Dulin's film last year and stuff, I think the thing I wrote down was he makes the easy catches look hard, but he makes the hard catches still look hard, but he catches them. Yeah. Every catch looks hard for him, but he comes down with it a lot. I mean, he comes down with it. So it's like, whatever. But yeah, he made a couple of nice catches last year too. I think there was one against, I want to say the Jets, where he had like a deep out route, and the timing between him and Wentz was a tad off. So he had to like lay out for it, and he had to drag his feet, and he had that one perfectly. So yeah, I mean, Dulin, it's weird. For such a great athlete, he's kind of awkward, but he makes a lot of really impressive catches. Some of them on hard throws, some of them on easier ones. But, as long as you come down with it, I don't care. Come down with it.
Very true. And I love how you put that, because I think Mo is kind of the same way.
Yeah, Mo is definitely the same way.
Yeah, he can make some impossible catches, or, he could, it looks like he's just got brick hands. You never know what you're going to do. Let's see. Another one was a Tyson Williams run. The Colts RB4, I believe, on the depth chart. They were kind of butted up against their own goal line. Yeah. it looked like it would have been a legit play during a game. He just kind of gashed up, kind of the left belly right up the middle. He, of course, in practice took off. It would have been a 99-yard or whatever, but legit in game, probably 20 yards or so. So that was good to see. A validating run by him, I guess, because he's a decent runner, but it seemed he was RB4 by default because Deion Jackson, I don't want to say demoted, but he did get shuffled down the depth chart a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for Williams here in the preseason games. I think it's big because I do think there's an outside chance he could, take that RB4 or maybe an RB3 job with a strong preseason. So I'm excited to watch him because he's a young player that had some good film last year.
Mm-hmm. So Zach, of course, training camp's got me running around without much time to do anything else besides worry about football. Sometimes that means I barely even have time to eat, and that is the perfect opportunity for me to snag a Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. You ready? It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough, which is covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. It's got a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Feel all of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of actually making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding spot and just hoard them for yourself.
Which is what you've been doing with all these training camp days here.
Yeah.
But what's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need a quick bite to eat. Gosh, I cannot talk today, guys. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, ditch the fat, ditch the sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo LOCKED15. All right, let's talk some defense, guys. And there's one guy I really want to talk about because I feel like we haven't properly talked about him enough. We've mentioned this guy a lot, but obviously we have our favorites on the defensive line, on the interior defensive line battle. We have I don't know who my favorite is currently, but I have some favorites on the interior defensive line battle. But RJ McIntosh, I keep seeing his name popping up every single day. Pass deflections, pressures, getting runs with the twos, rotating in with the ones. Like RJ McIntosh had another strong day today, right, Jake?
Yeah, he sure did. And Curtis Brooks is our guy, RJ McIntosh is Joel Erickson's guy. So it's time to give Joel his flowers on this hit so far with McIntosh. No, he's been really active, and he's deserving some of these rotational reps with the ones. He's really aware of passing lanes, it seems like. For the second time today, he got his hands up into a passing lane against Matt Ryan. And this time it led to an interception. Got his hand up, tip pass, and Bobby Okereke flew in for the interception. So he's really aware there. He could get some penetration. I think he's a little better of a run defender. But, for interior defenders who don't rush the passer all that well, the next best thing you can do is know where the passing lanes are coming and just get your hands up. And I think that's the second day in a row that I've mentioned that he's done a really good job of doing that. He's looked pretty good in the one-on-ones, uses his hands pretty well in combat, not just in passing lanes. But, yeah, he's been a pleasant surprise. He's making his case for a roster spot.
I have no clue how I'm going to stack this interior defensive line battle. I really have no clue. Like, Curtis Brooks is the most athletic, versatile pass rusher on that interior. Eric Johnson is the freaky athlete run defender. McIntosh is playing really well. Coward has a ton of experience. Chris Williams was the inside track guy going into camp. Like, how the heck do you pick two of these guys out of this group? Like, that's going to be insane.
No idea. Yeah, and the tough thing is, again, we've talked about Chris Williams was the third guy coming into camp, but he's been gone since the first practice, and it sucks to say because he's a pretty decent player, but if you're not, it's the same thing with Mike Strachan on offense. If you're not there, the other guy, you have to give the other guys the spot. So, I mean, just for me personally, I've been kind of paying attention to Williams. Initially, he was out in one of those big boots, and he's had just a little brace on lately, so he may be getting closer to returning. So that'll be good. You know, it was about this time last year where he really turned it on when the Panthers came in for the joint practices. Of course, this time next week, the Lions will be in town. There's about 2.5 weeks left, so there is still time for him to do it, but he's got some ground to make up.
Yeah, no, all these other guys are playing well. You know, Eric Johnson, we're talking about every day. Curtis Brooks, obviously, we're talking about every day. But yeah. I see him mentioned by other people as well. And Brian Coward, again, he's getting a lot of run out there. So it's like that's going to be so tough there. But who else stood out to you? Any of the edge players had a good day?
Yeah. So Adenigbo put another sack on his counter there. I don't even know how many it is, but I think it's at least 4 within the last 5 practices. Yeah. So he's been doing really well. Something I've been happy to see about him is, you know, you and I kind of talked about him being like a souped up Al-Qadim Muhammad, but he's showing some bend and some athleticism around the edge and getting to the quarterback. And as a guy who can kick inside and kind of play the run a little bit as well, or be like a inside situational pass rusher, I didn't expect him to be that athletic and flexible, I guess, but he is.
Yeah, no, he's a talented player. I mean, again, 7 sacks a couple years ago with the Vikings. Always been a very, very capable player. He's kind of like, if you could bottle up those couple good rushes that you would get from Al-Qadim Muhammad a year, like, you know, like the 5 that you would get from him, and just expand them a little bit more and have a little bit more consistency, that's kind of what you get out of it. And that's why, you know, I and obviously you were pretty big on that signing when it happened, because if he's your 6th defensive end or 5th defensive end, you're doing good. That's a good player to have right there. So, I'm not shocked that he's having a good camp, especially if he's running with the 2s against, you know, Spriggs or Jordan Murray and all those guys out there off the edge.
You'll not be surprised to know DeForest Buckner had a really good day again. I counted like 3 plays in a row where he was super disruptive or made the play himself. There was a play where he blasted through the line, and then it was like the whole defensive front got to Jonathan Taylor all at once immediately. The next play, he burst through again, which caused Ryan to hesitate for just a second and go to his next read. And by that time, Kenny Moore had been coming off a nickel blitz and was able to bat the pass away. And then I think he just did it again. And Ryan got rid of the ball that other time, but he was all over the place. So not surprising. But it was a big linebacker day today. And I've mentioned Okereke and Speed had an interception. But we finally got a nice little play from Sterling Weatherford.
Yes.
I think it was So Jack Cohn was going to Ethan Fournier. That's another guy. I don't know how to say his last name. Fournier. I don't know. I'll get it eventually. But no, it was maybe like a little 5-yard comeback or something, and Weatherford was just right there to lower his shoulder into him and kind of blast him away from the ball. So it was good to see something.
There we go. Yeah, that's something there. Another thing that you mentioned, though, that I want to jump to real quick is you talk about those nickel blitzes. I saw a lot of talk today. You know, Tony Brown had a sack or a pressure.
Yep.
Kenny Moore right there on a nickel blitz. Were you guys seeing a little bit more nickel blitzes thrown in there today?
I've seen it throughout camp so far. It seems to be one of the most frequently used blitzes through camp so far, and it's working. You had a whole thing where you talked about when Gus Bradley blitzes. It's not often, but it seems to work. Kenny Moore is one of the best blitzing corners in the entire NFL. So Gus Bradley kind of hit a home run, getting him grandfathered into that deal. But Tony Brown has been pretty decent too. I think I've counted Anthony Chesley getting to the quarterback a couple times throughout camp. So these little wrinkles seem to be working, at least against the Colts offense.
Yeah, again, not to go on too much of a tangent here, because you guys can read all about this in an article I wrote recently on Gus Bradley about his blitz tendencies and some of his blitz calls. But his nickel corner blitzes are called snake blitzes. Basically, you're just going to snake that nickel corner off the edge there. He likes to do it when the corner's on the play side, you know, against trips or against the side with the tight end or something like that. He'll just sneak that corner off the side there. Super effective. Nate Hobbs last year, I think, had 10 pressures. I think a sack and 3 or 4 quarterback hits. Yeah. No, I think he had 10 pressures last year on, like, I want to say it was like 30 or 40 rushes. So not a ton. So when Bradley does bring those snake blitzes, they are pretty effective. So it doesn't shock me he's throwing those out in camp, and I expect him to do more with Kenny this year than he did with Hobbs last year. Hobbs was a good blitzer, like Hobbs did a good job with it, but you just have much more versatility with Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore is a lot more comfortable blitzing off the edge because he's done it so many times.
Yeah, and my last point on defense involves a couple more defenders. Just a couple of guys who had really good coverage plays I wanted to point out. Nick Foles threw one down the right sideline about 30 yards to Desmond Patman, and Patman it was Marvell Tell in coverage. Patman made a really good play on the ball to try and get it, but Marvell Tell's coverage was just so involved and just right there that Patman just could not get to it. So it was really good to see. We're going to keep shouting out Marvell Tell when he does good things, because if it works with Marvell Tell, that's going to be a very good thing for this defense. And then Nick Cross, maybe with an even better play. Matt Ryan went about 40 yards down the left sideline to Michael Pittman Jr., and it was Nick Cross who was there just stride for stride with Pittman and broke up the pass when it got down there. So a couple of young guys with a nice pair of pass breakups today.
I don't know how much you remember the play with Michael Pittman Jr. there, but was Pittman in the slot on that play, or was he like an outside receiver and Cross was
I think it was just safety? I think it was I didn't notice the beginning of it, but I don't think it developed for very long, so I feel like maybe Pittman was on the outside left and maybe Cross just picked him up as he was coming downfield.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
There was a little more cover 2 involved later in practice. It wasn't all Julian being single high, so
yeah, that's why I was thinking, because I was going through I don't want to say that, actually. I don't think I'm allowed to say that. I was going through notes I have on Gus Bradley's older defenses. And there are a lot of palms. There's a lot of cover 2, a lot of quarters type stuff. So I was curious if that was like a quarters coverage, like a deep coverage, or if that was like Pittman was in the slot and Cross was down, covering underneath, and he was just carrying him with that match coverage. So that's just my nerdy stuff there. I'll be able to watch it more in the preseason, obviously, but that's cool to see. Because Cross, I know we said it so many times in this podcast, he's going to be the strong safety. He's going to be in the box, but he's also going to be in deep coverage a lot. There's so much rotating of safeties nowadays. He will be deep a lot, and there will be a lot of cover 2 and quarters looks as well. So Cross is going to be able to show off that athleticism quite a bit.
No doubt. And then, so Cross is one guy that we think we're going to see probably a lot on Saturday, if I had to guess. The next thing we're going to discuss is the Colts and the playing time for the starters in this preseason matchup on Saturday. So it looks like, depending on how drives go, Matt Ryan and some of the other starters could see up to a quarter, which is a lot for a Frank Reich team and just in the modern NFL in general anymore. But I kind of get where they're coming from. They've lost in week 1 and have had slow starts in general for the last 10 years. Something's got to change. I mean, you have to take the balance of risk of your guy getting hurt versus being ready and, feeling prepared to go in week 1. I don't think you're a big proponent of playing starters in the preseason. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I need to preface this by saying I'm not a big proponent of the preseason at all. I despise preseason football. I think it's a waste of time. I think it's purely for TV ratings. That's all it is. It serves no purpose for these players. Like, don't get me wrong, the bottom of the roster players, it does serve a purpose for them because they get to get out there and show what they can do with the pads on and live action. But if you're a starter or a person that's actually going to play in the regular season, I don't think the preseason matters whatsoever. It's so vanilla. Everything that's being thrown around out there is not real football. It's like Pro Bowl football out there. Like, yes, you're hitting, yes, you're being competitive, and you want to see that, but it's just adding extra hits to these guys who were in their upper 20s or their 30s, or Matt Ryan, who's in their upper 30s. If he gets hit once in the preseason game, it's a wasted hit that you're allowing on your almost 40-year-old quarterback. So just to preface all this, I hate the preseason. I don't think starters should ever touch the preseason. But I do want to shout out our guy, JV3 on Twitter. He made a really good point about the Colts' slow starts in September. And it's like, everyone can throw that out there, like 6-16 or something like that, or whatever the number is. I don't know the exact number in September games under Frank Reich. But it's like, look at all the situations they were going into, right? 2018, Andrew Luck he started off super slow. Andrew Luck was not playing good football to start 2018. Like, I love Andrew Luck to death, but he missed the entire 2017 season and was not Andrew Luck to start 2018. Going to 2019, you got Jacoby Brissett after just being told he's the starter going into it. And even then, Jacoby Brissett's not that great a quarterback. Then you get Phillip Rivers after no offseason, really, because of COVID. And then you get the busted ankles of Carson Wentz last year. So, like, yes, you could say this team starts slow. And yes, there has been some issues early in the season. But there's been some reason for that. You know, there's been injuries to the quarterbacks. There's been inconsistency from quarterbacks. There's been just lack of fluidity because of offseason programs, not because of these. Like, I don't think in any of those situations, if you put the starters in for an extra quarter or 2 quarters in the preseason, that those starts are better. You know, I don't think that changes anything whatsoever. Yes, they've been a little sloppy to start the year, but I don't think the preseason is something that's going to fix that. I just think that they need to be better. Like, I don't think the preseason is something to do that. I don't think adding more chance to get injured or taking more hits to veteran players is a way to rectify that. But, you know, I don't mind them taking, looking into things to change an obvious, like, fault they've had over the last couple of years or an obvious weak point they've had. But that's just me. I hate the preseason in general. So it's hard for me to be objective about this. But, man, I don't know. If someone gets hurt, you know, I'm going to be complaining about it on Twitter, though. That's what I'm going to be doing.
For sure. There's a reason a lot of people hate it. We've seen guys get hurt and have season-ending injuries before the season even starts. I think OBJ had his a couple years ago with the Browns. I think that was or maybe it was Giants. I don't know, but OBJ had one.
Jordy Nelson tore his ACL.
Jordy Nelson. Preseason. Michael Vick is the most famous example. But I think I'm okay with it with guys who were in roster battles.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not gonna lie. I'm scared to death of Matt Ryan being out there because if something happens to him, you have aspirations of a Super Bowl this year.
Right.
Yeah. He's 37, going to be 38. He takes a hard hit. You know, he's been durable throughout his career, but all it takes is the wrong hit. I understand them playing him just to get into it and get a rhythm, I guess. But even if it means he completes no passes, I would make sure that dude gets the ball out of his hands immediately at all times. Like, have a personal protector back there with him, have an extra running back or tight end that just travels with him wherever. Like, if he plays, I would have him in as much hypothetical bubble wrap as they could do.
Yeah, and honestly, a quarterback I'm not as concerned about. Given Matt Ryan, I'm a little concerned about because he is older, but it's really not even him because quarterbacks, they do take hits. Quarterbacks typically do stay healthy. I get more nervous like a running back like Jonathan Taylor. Right.
I doubt Taylor's touching the field.
Right.
I mean,
he should not touch the field.
Yeah.
No chance.
Frank was asked about it today, and he made it sound like it could go either way. They're still talking about it, but I don't see it happening. Like,
yeah,
if he wants to get a hit, I would do it in a controlled environment. I would let them go live in practice for a session or something, but put the fear of God in them that if they tackle him like below the waist or something, like, you're toast. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let him get a hit if he wants to get hit, but do it in an environment you control.
Right.
Don't let some guy who's trying to make the roster for the other team tackle him at the knee and blow his ACL out. Like,
right. Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this is, like, sure, for your guys like Matt Pryor, he's almost certainly going to be a starter. I'm cool with him playing a couple series in the preseason because he's a starter, but he's still kind of in a battle. Danny Pinter's another guy who he's probably a starter, but, you know, put him out there. I get it. Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, maybe not as much for Paris Campbell just in case, but you know what I mean? Like, those kind of guys. But Stephon Gilmore, I don't need to see him once in the preseason.
No.
Yannick Ngakoue, no chance. I do not need to see him. DeForest Buckner, absolutely not. Matt Ryan, absolutely not. But I guess putting him out there for like a series each game. But once it gets to like 20, 30 snaps, I'm like, okay, get him out of there. Jonathan Taylor, don't touch the field. I'm borderline with Michael Pittman Jr. too, because, like, we know what he's going to do. Like, we don't need him out there. But I'm
Same
okay with
Naheem.
Yeah, Naheem Hines.
I'd barely let Naheem go out there.
Kenny Moore's had some injury things the last couple of years where he's had some nicks and bruises. Like, why are we giving him extra hits in the preseason? I don't know. I know people are going to disagree, and people are going to say, like, adding maybe another 10 hits on these guys over the course of a season isn't that big a deal. But I'm of the opinion that I don't want to add more wear and tear to these guys' bodies when they're about to go into a 17-game season. I think that's why the NFL took away a preseason game, because they acknowledged that, look, we can't keep adding more hits to these guys and expect them to function. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like the preseason anyway, so I can't be objective about this. But for at least those guys, your Gilmores, your Ngakwe's, your Matt Ryans, your Jonathan Taylors, like, don't touch the field. I do not want to see them adding hits to those guys.
Yeah, there's a handful of guys, like you mentioned, like guys who are established Pro Bowlers, all pros. You don't need to see anything. Like they want to get some hits and get ready for the season. But some guys I want to see, just because they're fringe starters almost. They could have a bigger role if it weren't for the guy ahead of them. Whatever. I'm looking at like Ashton Dulin, Kylan Granson, Bernard Ryman, Dio, EJ Speed, and Isaiah Rodgers. Those are some of the guys I want to see a lot of. Like, they can act as the Colts starters. They're pretty good players and could start in a pinch. Let them carry the load. They need a lot of reps because they're probably not going to see as many during the regular season. Right.
Last thing I'll add is Dio, I think, is a perfect example. He needs preseason because he really didn't get much run last year. So I get it with him. But yeah, these other guys, no, I'm out.
Yeah. Totally agree. So that is all for us today, everybody. We'll be back with you tomorrow, of course. The Colts have their last practice of the week on Thursday. They travel Friday, and then they will be in Buffalo to face the Bills at 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday.
Make sure you guys are following us on social media at Jake Arthur NFL for all your training camp updates, news and notes that he puts in his articles after camp. Those are great. At Zach Hicks 2, or at Zach Hicks 2, almost threw NFL at the end of 2 there. At Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. You can see all my Gus Bradley articles in the series I'm doing with that. At horseshoehuddle.com is where we are putting all of our written content. So make sure you're following Horseshoe Huddle with Fan Nation through Sports Illustrated. And then over here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. I mean, we have a little bit ways to go to 1,000, but we can make that my header on Twitter if you guys get us to 1,000. And then wherever you listen to your podcast, leave a nice little comment or review or something like that. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, we had a nice little spike in YouTube subscribers today, I feel like. So if you guys even go above and beyond and say like 1,500, maybe we'll have to sweeten the pot a little bit. We don't know.
Well, to do one like this with Jake, though. Well, to do this one of these things for you, that's what we'll have to do.
I'll have to sacrifice something, because Zach has attempted to sacrifice his hair, his Twitter banner, all this stuff in the last year or so. But thank you guys again for making us your first listen today. Now make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert Vinny Iyer, who brings over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle to give you the moves that no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy drafts with Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll see you guys tomorrow.